Welcome to Unboxing Logistics, the hot new podcast from Easy Post, where we dive into all of the latest challenges and trends going on in the logistics industry. I'm Lori Boyer, and I am your host. And today we are going to be talking all about one of the most challenging aspects. I shouldn't even say most challenging. There's so many challenging aspects of this industry, but we are going to be diving into porch piracy. And I have brought on a really exciting guest today who is in the know on this topic and especially around a lot of the legal issues. So I have with us today Jessica Lowrance from UPS. Jessica, welcome. Can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me today. I'm excited to talk about this issue that kind of plagues everybody, right? Nobody's immune to porch piracy. I'm Jessica Lowrance, and I am Vice President of Federal Affairs at UPS, where obviously we are a shipper of choice for many of your listeners, and porch piracy is an issue. And, it seems to creep up this time of year with it being the holidays, and people seem to experience it even more than other months of the year.
Yeah, for sure. Jessica, so you work with Congress to help work with legislative issues, helping really on a legal basis. Can you tell me a little bit about maybe how you got into that? That's just really cool.
Yeah, so believe it or not, I'm 20 years in the postal industry. I started at the United States Postal Service as an economist, regulatory economist for them, pricing economist, and then moved over to the Association for Postal Commerce, where I was lucky enough to work with one of the infamous Gene Del Polito, who led the organization for many years. And it was just, a solid voice in the industry. So I got to learn a lot of the ropes from him, testified before Congress representing the industry and different aspects of meeting with members of Congress and their staffers. And then as e-commerce took off in 2012, I was lucky enough to get to know the UPS folks who joined our board, and they eventually extended an invitation to join them in 2017, where I have grown my portfolio. First, it was just postal, and I've grown it to include regulated goods, hazmat, beer, wine, firearms, and then the UPS store as well, which is a great addition to a UPS offering.
I love it. It is really cool. So everybody, Jessica's out there kind of on the front lines trying to represent us, trying to make sure that we get legislation passed that's going to protect our interests, protect the industry. And that's really, really cool. So I want to hear about it. I want to hear more about kind of how the challenges of it. It's an interesting role in the logistics industry. But first, I want to get to know you a little bit more. So one question this season that I have been asking all of our guests is, tell me what you were like as a teenager. Tell me what you were like in high school. Were you the perfect cheer captain? Were you a dropout at 14? We seem to run the gamut.
So I would say, and it's funny that you ask, because my oldest is 15 turning 16. So high school is constantly a topic in our household. I would say I was an overachiever. I joined every club. I was part of, sports teams. I worked, I volunteered, and I would say that you could probably characterize me as one of those busy bees. I never sat still, learned it from my parents, who were huge folks in the church, but also volunteered in our community. They helped run like a 3-week carnival when I was growing up. So we just to raise money for the community and for, centers and stuff. And so it was one of those where I think I learned a lot from them about just constantly having, a finger in every pie, or, however the saying goes, to constantly just be a part of it. And I love trying new things and doing new things. And, I'm one of those, I'll stick to it till the time's over. And then, if I didn't want to do it again, I just, kind of step away. But I always like trying new things. Even now as an adult, I'm always trying something new.
Okay, I wish we lived closer together because I think we could totally be friends. I was very similar in sports and in choir and in AP classes and in the clubs and so I love that. That's very, very fun. It's been really interesting talking to people in the industry because it really does run Like we literally have people who dropped out and started working on their own when they were young, and people who were super overachievers. And I think as a parent, it helps me know, like, okay, you can still be super successful. There's a lot of different paths to doing this. They don't have to all be like us, Jessica, doing everything. So, okay, my second question is, if you were to win the lottery today, how would your life look different? What changes would you do?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Well, we're in the market to buy a car, so we'd be a car household very easily instead of, looking for the best deal sort of thing. I would say probably more focused on volunteering or, giving back. I'm lucky enough UPS has a fantastic foundation that we give to that the company provides, and watching them through disaster relief and getting things, whether it was in Puerto Rico or Hawaii or things overseas, very much would want to support efforts like that. Another really big one that they do that I find fascinating is truckers against trafficking. So it's a huge issue in the United States, and UPS started a foundation or association around that and handed it off. And now, it's run, and truckers from all over the country are a part of it. And like causes like that are impactful and have immediate, again, impact to the communities around them or the nation as a whole. I would definitely like to be involved more. Like, giving money is one thing, but like being boots on the ground, I very much could see myself participating in things like that.
I love that. That is very similar to how I would have answered as well. And honestly, I get quite a few people. Everybody should be winning the lottery, because I think a lot of good things would happen in the world if we all had more money. So,
yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So I want to hear, we're going to dive into the topic of porch piracy. We're going to talk about, kind of its background, the trends with it, everything that our audience is curious about. But I want to know from you, before we even get started, what are a couple of things that you would like our community to come away with today? That if they only remember one or two or three things, what are those things what are the hot takes that you've got that you think are most important for people to remember around this topic?
Yeah, so I would say, both first I'll take it from a kind of a UPS store perspective or a UPS perspective. There's definitely, when we have to come back 2 and 3 times, there's always a cost associated with that, right? When we're unable to leave a package by the door, but we don't want to leave it by the door and have it stolen, right? So it's a catch-22. So I would say, knowing, if you can do your Prime Day, on Thursday, because you work from home on Thursdays, or you have, the ability to have it when you're going to be home is always beneficial, because, we knock, we don't stick around and chat, but we do knock so that that there's a package there, especially if you're in an area where, porch piracy is pretty prevalent, I would say is a good idea. There's also a lot of stores are becoming access points. So, you're going to go be driving by Staples on the way home, or Office Depot, or, the lock boxes that are known. Those things are always good secondary choices. If it's not inconvenient, there's nothing, we don't want to inconvenience, but having a package stolen is inconvenient, right? So it's like, sometimes you have to pick your inconvenient. And obviously if you live in an apartment building and you have a doorman or you have things like that, that makes it, life so much easier, but, not everyone has access to those, kind of services. So I would say, especially if you're on a busy street, be thoughtful about it. Leaving instructions for a carrier. You could drive around the back of my townhouse building and put it by my garage instead of my front door, right? Like, think about things. We bought, we didn't buy it. My husband built like a crate, because we had dogs, and the dogs kept, when they were puppies, would like rip open the packages, and we would walk home, and something Santa Claus was supposed to be getting the kids is now all across the lawn, and the kids are like, I thought Santa was getting me that. I'm like, oh, I talked to him. You're not. I'm getting it for you, right? Because
we collaborated here.
We're figuring it out, right? And so, but like we built a bin that it goes in. Now that may be a big alarm, like, oh look, there's packages here, but it was always in one place, and so whether it was Amazon or FedEx or Postal or UPS, it all dropped in there. So like it was one location instead of trying to like hunt around for packages in our, front porch, back porch, garage, this, that, and the other. So I would say, planning deliveries at this time of year when it's, we do see a spike in porch piracy is good. And I would say if, pick your inconvenience if you do have to pick a secondary location, because maybe you're traveling for the weekend and you're not going to be there and you don't want your package sitting out. Doing a lockbox or a Staples or, many of the very, different partners we have, and not just us, all the companies are doing it, makes it very convenient, set that way. Because if you think about it, if you're going to New York City for the holiday season and you're going to be gone Friday, Saturday, and come back Sunday, and you're expecting a package Friday, they're going to come back Saturday, they'll probably come back Sunday, and at some point they return to the sender or they keep it at their customer service centers, forcing you to, drive to them, which in some cases could be 45 minutes, an hour away, right? I mean, it's not everyone lives urban where it's right down the road. So I would say just being a little more thoughtful will probably, it's inconvenient to think that far ahead, but at the same time, it's ends up saving you a lot of time not to have to deal with it.
Yeah, I love that. So let's talk about porch piracy in general. So when did you start seeing kind of this becoming a big issue? I don't remember as a kid, for instance, having issues with people stealing packages if they came. It seems to have ramped up. I guess let's kind of cover the history of how did porch piracy, when did it sort of start to take off? What is the difference now maybe between porch piracy even 5 or 10 years ago?
Yeah. So I would say that obviously e-commerce in 2012, when that kind of started spiking, the real introduction of direct to consumer, right? So for so many years, you had business to business deliveries, right? We would deliver goods to Toys R Us. We would deliver goods to Kohl's, and people would get in their cars and they would drive, right? And then kind of e-commerce in 2012 took off, and then the pandemic happened, in 2020, and you saw, 10 years of growth in 3 months in the pandemic. And so I would say around 2018 is when the phrase was coined, where, someone would come in and steal, the package. And, I think as it grew and people started experiencing, I mean, you go into any Hill office and you bring up the word porch piracy, I've never met a staffer who hasn't had a package stolen, right? I think it's part of the customer buying experience now, and it's not the fault of the carrier or even the company you're buying from. It's just the reality of the world we live in today. And so I think, just kind of, level setting it's happening everywhere. Rural communities see less of it just because it's such, there could be very far drives between porches, and you might have to go up a private road. So it's not as, oh, I live in a townhouse community and you could follow the brown truck through the whole thing and snap, as you go through, right? So it's a different experience. Rural communities maybe not as prevalent. Obviously, urban and suburban areas where you have density, it makes it easier for it to occur. One of the, and again, looking at like the beginning trends of it, I think it was more folks were looking for certain brands, right? So I think in the beginning, a lot of folks would make custom boxes. So you knew it was an Apple product, or you knew it was like a higher end product because it was part of the opening experience and the buying experience. And oh my goodness, it's here. Now everything's in a brown box, right? Because maybe you can see the red Target guy on there, the bullseye, and those kind of like symbols that you're used to, the branding of it, but it's not as prevalent to have these showy boxes as it once was. Because, everything kind of looks the same. I mean, sometimes the only way it's from Apple is when you look at the, size 7 font on the label and it says, Apple. And sometimes they're even taking that away and just calling it a distribution center or, a distribution center, because they don't even want you to know that it's certain products because of the tendency to look for those and try to steal those. So, I definitely think that you've seen, people accept that it's part of the buying experience, both from a consumer and a seller standpoint, and then try to change things to make it less of an issue. I also think I hate to say it, but because it's so easy to get refunds or get a new package, that it's almost like, and you see it with credit cards too, right? Like, I mean, you see fraudulent activity on your credit card account and it's just magically just goes off into the ether, right? And kind of the same thing with the package. My Amazon package didn't get delivered. Okay. Or my Kohl's, or, name all the retail brands. And they're like, okay, well, we're going to send a new one out and did this and this and this and this and this. And then they kind of, credit you or send you a replacement. Obviously they do their own internal investigations, just like, Big Brown would do. But, for the most part, it's more of just a cost of doing business and part of the consumer experience. It's so ingrained in us now, right?
Yeah. So it brings up some questions for me. So, you referenced the fact that we know, of course, it's not the carrier's fault. It's not the business's fault. And yet it still kind of impacts that customer journey, right? The customer experience, especially when we talk holidays or something, you're hoping that you were going to get this package at a certain time, it gets stolen, and suddenly you don't have something for Christmas or for somebody's birthday or whatever time-sensitive needs you have. So what are some things that you've seen businesses specifically do? So I loved how you mentioned, first of all, the packaging has changed. That people are no longer just making a really flashy box that is like a target for thieves. Mm-hmm. But what are some other things businesses can do to kind of help their customers avoid this problem?
I would say if it's above a certain dollar threshold, you're starting to see a lot more signature confirmation where the person has to physically receive the package. I would say they also say they started ship to store. Right. So I want to buy it from the warehouse or I want the online deal, but they're going to ship it right to Target. And then, so I know it's going to be there. And then I get the email that it's there, especially for big and bulky items where it could, there could be a delivery surcharge. They almost, phrase it as, oh, well, avoid this charge and come pick it up at the store kind of thing. And so you're seeing much more trying to drive, their buildings are assets, but also expenses, right? Because they got to keep them open. So driving more foot traffic to it, giving rebates, right? If you come and ship to store, 10% off. Like you see all different folks trying different ways to lessen the cost. You also see, and Walmart and Target are looking to direct to consumer shipping in their own, hiring Uber drivers or, Uber delivers and working with them in partnerships and just trying to, there's so many middlemen in the journey sometimes that you see companies trying to take them out and be direct to consumer, but that it is, for being from a shipping company, it is not cheap to ship a product. The miles, the gas, the infrastructure, the person, the taxes, the labor associated with the sorting to get it into the street address. It's not as easy as I think everyone thought it was going to be. And you've seen a lot of people kind of step into the market and step out of the market sort of thing. So I think they're all trying to control the customer experience and having a really good Porch Pirate, my thing was stolen sort of experience helps make it right. Yes. And I think that is, but if they can control the whole journey and not have to hand it off to a carrier, then they feel they own it. Owning it's not always a good thing. Sometimes you can blame the carrier, right? But, so you see these larger companies trying to own it. The smaller guys, the mom and pops on top of, not the national retail chains, they do rely on the carrier. And part of the customer experience is dealing with the carrier too, right? So that's why, you see a lot of folks, even in the stolen package business, because sometimes it's not stolen. Maybe it got held up at a facility, or maybe it's in that endless loop because the zip code was transposed or something. Like, there's so many parts of the journey. And I know we're focusing on Porch Pirate, but I think, the carriers are, even though it's not their fault, and I'm not going to say all the time, but it's not their fault that, but we are part of the customer journey as well, and interacting with their customers, right? And so you see a lot of that in both, because sometimes we get the call, oh, my package was stolen. And we're like, well, you have to call the retailer, right? Because our transaction has ceased. It was delivered, and we have proven delivery through whatever method we prove delivery. And so kind of our interaction has ended. Well, then you should probably call so-and-so and let them know, or you need to report it, right? And there's always 911. That is one way of reporting it. And that is, and I have some statistics on that too, but it's definitely something that dictates the customer journey, right?
Yes. I had to say, I just recently relocated states. And one of the things, in the process of anytime you're getting a new house or whatnot, there ended up being a bunch of things that I'd purchased and were being shipped to the new house, but I wasn't going to be there yet. And I timed the delivery so that it would be around the time we arrived, because I didn't want everything sitting on the porch. And then they ended up arriving several days early. And I was there panicking, thinking, this is an expensive item sitting on my porch. And I was blaming the carrier, I have to say. And it ended up not getting stolen. It was fine. But if it had been stolen, I guess that importance of the accuracy of the delivery time, sometimes we think, oh, if it's early, it's just a happy surprise. But, having accurate delivery times in terms of you want it in the window, being early is not always good. That was just sort of an eye-opener for me. So yeah. How have you seen that in terms of like accuracy, I guess, of delivery times?
So I would say customers, outside of price being a major driver, right? Predictability, I would say, is up there as anything. That's why, I think folks being able to have day specific delivery, listen, I am traveling and I want you to deliver it Monday, right? But a lot of the times that has to happen with the retailer because of when they put things into the system. And other times it's on the carrier because, it's normally, predictively, we would say it takes us 5 days to get there. And today it took us 3. Right. And so we understand it, but we also can't hold things, we're not a warehouse, so we can't hold it. So, there's sometimes where it's like, oh, it's going from St. Louis to Kentucky, and that's a 5-day window. And you wanted it on Monday, so you did it. And the next thing you know, it's there Friday.
Yep.
Right.
So as a retailer, I think it's really interesting. There were a few things you mentioned that they can do. So getting the signature. So I had a few larger items where actually they did require that there was a signature. They tried to come early. I wasn't there, and they came back when we were there. And then also, as a retailer, then it sounds like there's a lot of expectation on you to make sure that you're getting those accurate times and dates in, and that you're putting it into the system in the right time. As a retailer as well, there's a lot of things you can do in terms of offering, potential insurance. You don't even usually have to pay for it. You can offer that as an option for your customers, that they can purchase insurance. A lot of times that's not even an option on websites. And so I think that's another great way that people can feel a little bit more secure. But as you said, a lot of times it ends up getting eaten as a cost for retailers anyway. So I think those are all great tips. So I want to talk a little bit about legislation around this issue as well. So I know that there are a variety of challenges we've had in the industry with this being able to be taken. You mentioned 911 and reporting things to the police. What are the challenges that we're seeing with laws and legislation around porch piracy? What are some of the issues that we have, nationwide in the United States?
So under current law, federal law, only the Postal Service is treated as a felony for porch piracy, right? And so carriers, any of them that doesn't have, the little eagle for postal on it, do not, it is up to local jurisdiction on how it is handled. 9 times out of 10, if they even come, it would be considered a misdemeanor. And I imagine larger ticket items probably hold more weight. But then you got to be able, even everyone's getting ring cameras, and even then you can barely make out with enough clarity on who is the person that's actually doing it. So the charges in these cases are very small. What we have seen and what we have heard is that it's the ones that folks really want to be prosecuted are the groups where it's organized, where they go in and they hit an entire townhouse, and take every package in a townhouse community.
So wait, let me back up just a minute. So this is an organized crime type activity that's taking place here.
Yes. So we have seen, outside of the smash and grab, organized retail crime, we're also starting to see it from a porch piracy perspective, where it's not aimed at the kid who steals the Apple headphones. It's the person who goes and follows the truck and steals all 200 packages out of, or you're even seeing them like get into delivery vans and taking it, right, and stealing the delivery vans, right, and 2 miles down the road, it's sitting. They don't want the vehicle. It's sitting there with the keys in it, but it's completely cleaned out, right? So you're seeing a lot more of where it's purposeful in their activity, and so that has led a lot of conversation about making porch piracy a felony at certain levels, in order to hold folks accountable for when it is an organized kind of retail crime, or it's large dollar amounts, right? So I don't know, you have your diamond ring, serviced and they shipped it back. I don't think you would, but in case you did, those kind of things, or maybe you bought a new mattress and it's sitting outside, or any of the million things in which you could get delivered. It's not the dog food or the pack of pens you bought off Amazon. It's more focused at the organized retail level of it, and having it. So currently, like I said, there's no federal legislation. There are 8 states that have actually made it a felony for porch pirate to be, caught being porch pirate. It's Kentucky. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's Kentucky, New Jersey, Georgia, Tennessee, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Michigan, and Texas. So you can kind of just see from the list that, it's affecting large parts of the country. You can't say it's all southern states or all northern states. There's some Midwest states in there. So it's definitely where constituents are seeing it. They're complaining to their local folks, and I'm sure they're complaining to federal officials too, but kind of more of a local, because it's, when you call 911, it's your local person, right? So it's a local jurisdiction. So states have started to take it very seriously. A lot of times when you can get a federal law in place, a lot of the states adopt the federal law. So that's why it would be helpful to have it as an umbrella across state. Plus, a lot of these things can happen over state lines. And so states get really kind of fishy about over state line stuff. So having a federal umbrella, acknowledging it. There are some efforts. There's a couple members of Congress who are very interested. And it's not a problem, that there's already so much already in law around stealing a UPS truck or a trailer or all those things, or, breaking into a rail car, that it really would only take a sentence. The bill would literally be 1 sentence long to add to already existing provisions, right? To just say, oh, and the front porch. So we are working to maybe use it as an amendment to an existing bill where you would just add, we want to add this 1 sentence to Title 18, Section 657, which is the actual provision we want to add into, that deals with carriers and rails and that sort of thing, in order to then add a package left for the household or for the recipient, or is taken prior to acceptance from the recipient, one of those sort of carefully worded. So it directs you to porch pirate, but we can't write porch piracy into law, right? Because that's just a term that's being used, but it could always change, right? So plus, again, we don't want the one-off kid that stole something. We want the more organized, where it's, cleaning out an entire community, or, they constantly do it or follow certain trucks around. And And it's a problem. There's Forbes has a great article out on this. Cap One Research has a great article out on this, and Chamber of Commerce just released a new report looking at porch piracy because it's so impactful. In 2022 alone, it was $19.5 billion worth of goods. Right,
That's astounding.
And so people are taking it, and then they create an online account, and then just. Because think about it, it's still in the box, it's packaging. They could just say it's new, and then they're selling it at price, right?
Yes.
And so that's why, the organized side of it, I mean, you can't stop the one-offs, and there's not really enough resources in the world to stop the one-offs, but it's when they're purposefully doing things or then reselling it at high dollar values, some of these goods. Yeah, and Forbes said 8 in 10 Americans, they have experienced porch piracy, that it's 40% urban, 40% suburban, and only 14% rural communities are affected. So I think, some of these larger cities are, seeing it and having to deal with it. Forbes even said the worst ranked states, which I was surprised at the worst ranked states, but it also kind of lines up with who has done legislation. But New Hampshire is number 1.
New Hampshire
in the country for porch piracy. So if you live in New Hampshire, I'm sure you've experienced it. Oklahoma, which matches up with legislation, right? Delaware, which I could totally see, because Delaware is largely a beach, not largely, but has a lot of beach where folks probably have shit delivered. They're not always at their homes. It's a secondary property maybe, or they're, send it prior to going to vacation and it sits there. So I could see that. And then Iowa, I don't know what they're doing out there in Iowa, and then Colorado was the top 5. So it's interesting. Again, not a lot of 911 calls, I think, are going to get a big response from folks. So it does kind of come from a corporate responsibility. They're probably, and I'm sure that, before long, there might be SEC required reporting on, goods stolen. And think about it, if there's a retail aspect of some of these stores on top of the porch piracy, they could be greatly affected from theft in general. So I think, you saw a lot of states moving away from making these heavy crimes, but then the theft has gotten so prevalent that it's almost like you see them starting to come back and that pendulum swing the other way, to kind of at least hold folks accountable, especially minors. Unfortunately, it's largely outside of even the organized crime is largely minors. And
really,
many states with the minors, for misdemeanors, they're out within an hour. Some aren't even brought forth. Like, they can find the guilty party and they're not even charged.
So one of the big challenges, it seems like, in this, area of topic is the fact that there are not very harsh consequences right now.
That's true.
Not very good safeguards in place to protect businesses and consumers.
And so I think it's twofold. It's not only is it that there's really nothing there that as a stick, right, to say don't do this. The retailers have made it so easy just to report the loss and get a new one that no one's worse off. The people who are worse off everyone's worse off when $19 billion of goods go missing, right? But the company's worse off, but then in the end, they need to charge more to make up for the loss that they're suffering because they can't have bad stock results or bad stock price, and they can't do this and they can't do that. So in the end, the consumer, even though we can't see it on a piece of paper, is experiencing increased prices because of $19 billion being stolen. And they're getting that money, right? No one's reporting massive losses from porch piracy, so they're getting the money back, right? So they're just finding different and creative ways to do it. And I think there's starting to be, at least from a retailer perspective and from a carrier perspective, a pushback on no consequences. Because there are consequences, just the average person can't see them. they're just paying for them, right?
Yes.
And so I think there, federal legislation would help. Continuing to then push the other, 42 states to at least consider making harsher consequences. I don't want to send anyone away, to prison for life for stealing, my packet of pens. But if they stole everybody's packets of pens, it's a different conversation, right?
That's right. So, okay, what do you recommend then? Let's say that you're a mid-sized retail business. What should you be doing? What can you do to A, minimize your own losses, B, help hold people accountable? Should people be reaching out to their congressman? Should they be, setting up more safeguards? Just where do they start?
Yeah, I think it would start with providing a lot of different options for getting the product to the consumer, right? Yeah. So I would say small businesses should have multiple options for delivery, right? So not just on the home, can they do day specific so someone could pick when they're home? I would even say looking at, store to pickup or ship to store. If that's not an option, because, and I do love the internet because you could buy from a consignment shop in Minnesota, right? And have it shipped to you. Looking at access points, working with the carrier to make sure that they are providing all of those things. And they could be different price points, right? But let the consumer make the decision, right? Let them pick their inconvenience, right? And you don't want to say it in a negative way, but that's the reality. Would they rather get this one kind of item, shipped to a box or shipped to Staples and pick it up because they know it's going to sit there safely, or sit on their front porch, right? So I would say multiple delivery options. And even if, and let's just be clear, nothing is free. So free shipping doesn't really exist. So I think the faster consumers realize that nothing's free and that there is a cost to it, and then again, making their own choices. So, okay, maybe this kind of delivery is included because that's easy for you. But then if they want an access point, or they want it a day specific, or they want something in addition to delivery, use it as a profit center. All right, well, it only really cost me $2, but I'm going to charge them $3, right? I think there's ways that to be creative that's beneficial to everyone. And then I think letting the consumers make the decision. I think that driving that, I think, is important.
I absolutely love that. I love the idea of choices and leaving it, as I talk about, the experience I had where I was all panicked because something came early. If I'd been given the option of, okay, somebody has to sign for this, I wasn't given that option during checkout on this particular business that I went to. If I had chosen not to do that, then I would have been like, okay, well, I chose to play with fire. So now, that was up to me and I didn't want to do it. Or if, like I mentioned earlier, you can get insurance or package protection options out there where if I'm like, I don't want to pay for that, well, then I feel a little bit of responsibility because I had a choice and I chose to risk it. And so I love, love, love your viewpoint of let the consumer kind of have some skin in the game, be part of that decision-making process, and know that you're all working together to try to figure out how to avoid this piracy issue. So I love that point, number one. So number two, let's talk about legislation. What can businesses do to help, move things forward? So if they are in a state, if they're in Idaho where my parents are, or if my brother's in Colorado where they already are a felony. But, if you're somewhere where it's not a felony, what can they do as a business to try to encourage that there are more consequences, especially for these organized crimes?
I would say if they're experiencing high volume of their products being stolen, that communicating that to both local and federal officials, right? So you can very much, go into Google and say, who's the congressman in, Colorado 1234, right? Who's my congressman, right? And you can find out who's your local congressman. Obviously, senators are a lot easier. There's only 2 per state, right? But finding out, sending their local office, right? There's so many members of Congress have local offices in their district that you could stop by. You could easily, and it'll tell you their address on their website. It'll also, so you can send a letter. There's email addresses where you can send and saying, listen, I'm a constituent, I own a small business, and I'm experiencing large volume of, package theft through porch piracy. And I would like the state, not only the state of, Kansas, Maryland, Virginia, to do something about it. I would like to see something federally happen. And I think the more people talk about the issue instead of acting like it doesn't happen, I feel like so many folks act like it doesn't happen. The consumers are knowing it's happening because they're getting the refund or they're getting the product, another product. But at a business level, it's kind of very, very hush hush, right? And so I think talking about it, talking with, especially as a small business owner, or you only have 2 locations in a state or something like that, doing outreach like that is more beneficial than UPS walking in and saying 0.125% of our packages are stolen every day, or whatever the number is. And they're like, well, how many is that? Well, we deliver on average 20 million pieces a day. So that's not a number, right? I mean, it's not as impactful as hearing from the small business from it being stolen, or hearing from the mom and pop shop, or the consolidator who works with 8 small businesses, or the platform companies that, that track it and know that they're stolen, or, everyone has a story to tell, and just having it out there is so much more beneficial than just grumbling and thinking that it's a part of the business.
So
you know what I mean?
I have to admit, to being a little bit of a cynic, I always think, oh, I'm just one business owner. I'm just one person. Does it
Chambers
even really make a difference?
I feel like locally bringing it up at a Chamber of Commerce meeting, right? I mean, that's what they're there for, is to represent. And so that the more the story is told, oh my goodness, this year we've had blah, blah, blah stolen, or, oh, everyone loves our new widget, and it is, we can't keep it on the shelf, but we're finding that, 25% of them are stolen on the porch, or whatever it is. Talking about it at a Chamber of Commerce meeting, because they have direct exposure to local officials, right? And so I think if it starts locally, you can see impacts in your state immediately. And then from there, anytime you reach out to a member of Congress, to their district office or even their DC office, you will get a response back. And if you have specific numbers, like I'm a small business, I make this much, be factual. I'm a $2 million small business, I'm a $100,000 small business. And, in 2023, I had to replace 200 goods to consumers because of this. This was the impact it had to my business. So instead of reporting blank profit, I now reported 0 profit, or whatever the impact is, because those add up. And if everyone who experienced it had that story to tell, that $19 billion could be accounted for like that, if every member of Congress knew that a portion of that was in their state.
I love that. And as I was saying, sometimes we get caught up in that idea of, oh, it doesn't really make a difference. I'm just one business. Nobody cares. But I love the idea that they do. So go in with numbers. Go in with just sharing your experience. Start local. You can go to state. You can go fed. But those are all great initiatives that we can take, and don't take that much time to try to make a difference. So I love that.
You'd be surprised, especially small businesses. You reach out to the district office for your congressman, they're going to follow up, and they're going to ask you questions. And then they might even be like, well, can the congressman stop in and see your operations? Can they meet your employees? So then all of a sudden it goes from you were reaching out because you experienced an issue in their district, in their local district, federal district. And the next thing you know, they're walking in your front door because they want to hear from you, or they want to see what you do to understand. And next thing, now you have a relationship, and that relationship, you and I were, before we even got started, you were asking some of the things we were looking at from a perspective and taxes, right? 2025 is going to be a huge tax year, right? So even if porch piracy is a small issue, taxes you pay both as an individual and as your company is going to be a huge year. So going in and establishing relationships locally and federally is one of the best things you can do from both a Chamber of Commerce perspective. You sit on your local Chamber of Commerce, or even as a business owner yourself.
That's so cool. That was like a total aha moment for me because this is a super relationship heavy industry. I've talked about that with multiple experts in the industry, how important it is to get a relationship with your carrier, with your suppliers, with, just all those relationships are really critical. And I never added that idea of it being also a relationship with our legislature, with, those who are out there doing those lawmaking. And so what a great opportunity to create relationships. Really brilliant there, Jessica. I love that. Okay, well, I think we're about out of time, but do you have any other tips or thoughts that you want to end with today?
Yeah, I would say, no one knows there's a problem until you let everyone know there's a problem, right? So the more, and I'm not saying, exaggerate or make it a bigger deal than it is, but just being factual and starting the relationships, right? I mean, imagine a year from now, we're doing this because we were able to get something into legislation, whether at your state or at the federal level, because folks stood up and said, hey, this is an issue for me and it's impacting me and my business. It's impacting my community. Those are the easy wins for Congress, right? Some of this other stuff is really hard. This stuff is really easy when people stand up and tell their story.
I love it. Awesome. Okay, Jessica, are you on LinkedIn or something if people want to follow you and keep up to date maybe with the latest bills that are in Congress?
Yes, I'm in LinkedIn and at any time, if they reach out to you and needing additional follow-up or help with anything, feel free to share my contact information. It's the hill can seem daunting, but I would say that once you do your first interaction, email, letter, all that's become easy because you set yourself into a process and you can very easily mimic that process anytime you need to.
I love it. It's the hill and it seems, like you said, intimidating, but it's still just people. So I love that idea. Thank you so much for being here. We've learned so much. I think that this is a really complex topic, but there are a lot of things we can be out there doing. So again, thank you for being here, everybody. Have a great week and we will talk to you next time.